The market was alive with noise, chains rattling, alien voices shouting prices, and strange smells filling the air. Creatures of many kinds were locked in cages, some with extra arms, some with glowing eyes, some barely moving, their spirits broken. The auction stage was made of black stone, and above it burned red lights, shining on those who were about to be sold. Among them sat Lyra, a young alien woman with silver skin and bright, terrified eyes. She was pushed forward by guards, her hands tied, her feet chained. The crowd laughed and shouted as if she was nothing more than an object. Some called her weak, some called her pretty. Some called her useless. She lowered her head, knowing she was not a person to them, only a pleasure animal. The auctioneer, a tall alien with sharp teeth, raised his hand. Next prize, rare and soft. Trained to obey, easy to keep. Who will take her? He shouted. The crowd roared, numbers flying through the air, each voice trying to win. Lyra trembled, her chest tight. Her hope long dead. She knew what would happen next. She had seen it happen to others, bought, used, broken, forgotten. But then, a strange sound cut through the chaos, a human voice, steady and calm. "I will take her." The crowd turned in shock. Silence spreading. Standing near the edge of the market was a man, middle-aged, broad-shouldered, dressed in simple clothes. He had gray in his beard, and his eyes were not cruel but firm. A human. Humans were rare in these parts, strange beings who did not always follow the same rules as the other species. The auctioneer laughed, showing his teeth. A human? Buying a pleasure animal? How strange, how funny. But no one else spoke, because the man's voice carried weight. He did not shout, he did not smile, he only repeated, "I will take her." The price was accepted. The deal made. The guards shoved Lyra toward him, still chained, still shaking. She expected his hands to grab her the way others had done, rough and greedy, but instead, he gently took the chain from the guard, not pulling, only holding it. His eyes met hers, and he said nothing cruel, nothing mocking, only quiet words. "You are safe now." Lyra did not believe him. Safe was not a word that existed in her world. She thought perhaps he was tricking her. Perhaps he wanted to make her trust him before hurting her. Her heart beat fast, fear and confusion twisting inside her. The crowd began to whisper, "What is he doing? Why would a human want that one? He should be ashamed. Humans are strange. Always breaking rules." The auctioneer shook his head and laughed again. "Do what you like, human, but remember, she is only property." Nothing more. The man did not answer him. He turned, guiding Lyra away from the stage. The chains rattled, the crowd stared, the whispers followed them. Lyra's legs were weak, her throat dry, but she kept walking. Her eyes kept searching his face, trying to see the monster behind the calm mask. But his face stayed the same, serious and tired, as if he carried a heavy weight. At the edge of the market, the man stopped. He knelt down to her level, his voice low so only she could hear. "You do not have to obey me, not unless you want to." Her eyes widened, confusion burning stronger than fear. No one had ever said those words to her, not once in her life. "Why?" she whispered, her voice shaking. He looked at her, and in his eyes was something she did not understand. Respect. "Because you are not an animal," he said. "You are a person." The words felt like a blade cutting her chains, but she did not know whether to believe them. Her whole life she had been told she was nothing. Now this strange human said she was something. Her mind told her it was a trick. Her heart wanted to hope. Behind them, in the shadows, a tall alien noble watched, his eyes narrow, his mouth curled into a smile that was not kind. He whispered to his servant, "This human is dangerous. Keep an eye on him." The market noise faded as Lyra and the man walked away. The chains still bound her wrists, but somehow they felt lighter. She did not know who this man was or why he had chosen her. But one thing was certain. Her life was about to change. And in that moment of silence, with her heart racing, she wondered if freedom was truly possible. The man looked at her one last time, and his words were simple. "My name is David," he said, "and if you choose, your life can begin again." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. For the first time in years, a single spark of hope flickered inside her chest. But hope was dangerous, and she did not yet know if she could trust it. The small transport ship left the market behind, the sound of chains and shouting fading into memory. Inside the quiet cabin, Lyra sat on the floor, her wrists still bound, her eyes never leaving the human called David. He worked at the controls calmly, guiding the ship through the black sky, His face steady, his hands sure, no anger, no greed. No cruelty showed in his eyes, only focus. Yet Lyra's heart beat fast. Because she had learned long ago that quiet men could hide sharp knives. For a long time neither spoke. Only the hum of the engines filled the air. Finally David turned and said, "You can sit in the chair if you want. No one will stop you." His voice was calm. Not demanding, not mocking, just an offer. Lyra shook her head slowly, too afraid to move. Too afraid it was a trick. She kept her eyes down, her chains rattling as she tightened her hands around her knees. He sighed softly, leaning back. "You think I bought you for the same reason they would have," he said. She lifted her head a little. Surprised at his words, he looked straight at her. "But I did not buy you to own you, I bought you to give you a choice." The words hit her harder than a whip. Because no one had ever spoken that way, she whispered, voice trembling. "Choice. What does that mean?" David stood and slowly came closer, kneeling down in front of her so their eyes met. He pulled a small tool from his pocket and touched it to her chains. A flash of light, a spark, and the locks clicked open. The metal cuffs fell away, clattering on the floor. Lyra gasped, rubbing her wrists, staring at him in shock. "No chains," he said. "Not unless you want them." Her throat was tight, her mind spinning. This had to be a trick. No man simply freed a slave, no man gave freedom away. "Why? Why are you doing this?" She whispered. "Because you are not property," David said quietly. "You're alive, and that means you get to decide." She felt tears burning her eyes, but she pushed them back, shaking her head. No, this is not real," she muttered. "You will hurt me later, you will laugh at me later." "That is how it always happens." David did not move closer. He only stood, giving her space. "You are free to believe what you wish," he said. "I will not force you." The ship landed near a small outpost on the edge of alien territory. Outside, the land was dusty, the sky pale, and a few buildings stood in silence. David guided her toward a house, simple but clean. He opened the door, stepping aside for her. "You may stay here if you want, or you may leave," he said. "The choice is yours." Lyra froze in the doorway, her chest rising and falling fast. Stay or leave, both felt impossible. If she stayed, she risked betrayal. If she left, she would die alone with no food, no shelter. Her mind screamed to run, but her feet would not move. Instead, she stepped inside slowly. Watching him carefully, every part of her body was tense, like a cornered animal ready to bite inside. She saw things she had never seen for herself. A table set with food, bread and fruit, clean water in a glass, a soft bed in the corner, blankets folded neatly. Her stomach growled painfully, and she hated herself for showing weakness. David noticed but said nothing. He only sat at the table, breaking bread quietly. He pushed a piece toward her. "Eat," he said. "It is yours." Lyra stared at the bread, her hand shaking. She wanted to grab it and swallow it whole, but she feared poison. She whispered, "If I eat, you will own me." David shook his head. "If you eat, you will live, that is all." Hunger won against fear, and slowly she reached out, taking the bread. When the taste touched her mouth, tears filled her eyes. It was simple, it was soft, and it was the first meal she had eaten without fear in years. That night she lay awake on the bed, her body stiff, her eyes on the ceiling. Every sound made her flinch, every shadow made her shake. But David did not touch her. He did not chain her. He did not even come near. He slept in another room, leaving the door open so she could leave if she wished. In the morning, whispers began in the outpost. Aliens pointed and laughed, saying, "The human has taken a slave as a wife." They mocked him, sneered at him, called him a fool. David ignored them, his face calm, his step steady. But Lyra felt the sting of their words, shame burning her skin. She wanted to scream she was not a wife, she was nothing. But the words stayed inside her throat. Late that evening, as the sun turned the sky red, Lyra stepped outside. She found David sitting alone, looking out at the horizon. He did not turn when she came, but his voice carried. "They will laugh, they will mock. They will never understand," he said. "Why do you not fight them?" she asked, her voice small. He finally looked at her, his eyes steady. "Because I do not care what they see, I only care what you choose to be." Her heart ached, torn between disbelief and a small spark of trust. She whispered, "And if I choose to leave?" "Then you leave," he said simply, "and I will not stop you." For the first time in her life, the chains were not on her wrists. They were in her heart, and now, for the first time, the key was in her hands. She did not know yet what choice she would make, But she knew her life was no longer the same. Far away in a dark hall,
The alien noble who had watched them at the market spoke to his servant. "The human is dangerous," he said, his voice cold. "No man frees a slave without a reason." The noble's eyes narrowed, shining with malice. "Find out his secret before it is too late." The days passed slowly, and Lyra began to see things she had never known before. The house was quiet, the air smelled of bread and wood, and no chains rattled at her feet. David rose each morning to work, fixing tools, checking maps, repairing the small ship. He never ordered her, never raised his hand, never forced her to do anything. It was strange, almost painful, because she did not know how to live without fear. At first she stayed in the corner of the room, silent as stone. Her eyes followed him, waiting for the moment when the mask would fall and the cruelty would show. But the mask never fell, because there was no mask. When he saw she was cold, he brought her a blanket. When he saw she was hungry, he placed food near her, never demanding she thank him. Slowly, the heavy walls in her heart began to crack. One morning she found him outside, sitting by a table with papers. He looked up as she came closer, surprised she had stepped into the sun. "Would you like to see?" he asked, tapping the paper. She hesitated, then nodded, sitting across from him. On the paper were drawings of stars, lines connecting them, notes written in human script. "What is this?" she whispered. "Our map," he said, "the sky above us, the paths between worlds." She studied the shapes, her silver eyes wide. No one had ever shown her something like this. He spoke softly, explaining how humans traveled, how they learned, how they remembered. For the first time, she was not a slave, she was a student. And in that moment, something inside her began to change. That evening, she helped him bring water from the well. Her hands shook at first, not used to work done freely. But when David smiled faintly, not mocking, not cruel, she felt warmth inside her chest. It was not fear, it was not shame. It was something she had never known respect, yet shadows still lingered. Sometimes at night, she woke with screams trapped in her throat. She remembered the cages, the hands, the chains. She would curl in the corner, trembling, tears running silently. And every time, David did not touch her, did not scold her. He only sat nearby, keeping watch, as if saying, "You are not alone." The bond grew slowly, fragile as glass, but real. Lyra began to speak more, her voice soft, asking questions. She wanted to know about Earth, about humans, about freedom. David answered patiently, his words simple, his eyes calm. He told her stories of green forests, blue oceans, and cities full of light. She listened with wonder, imagining a place where chains did not exist, but danger was never far. One night, as the stars shone above, a rock shattered the window. David rushed outside, but the attackers had already fled. On the ground lay a note written in alien script. "Animals do not deserve homes," it said. "Leave or die." Lyra's hands shook as she read it. Shame and fear twisting inside her. She whispered, "This is because of me." David shook his head firmly. "No, this is because of them. They fear what they do not understand." The next day, whispers spread louder in the outpost. Aliens laughed at David in the street, calling him broken, foolish, weak. Some spat near his feet, some hissed at Lyra. Her heart ached, her shame deepened, but David did not bend. He walked through them calm as stone, never lowering his eyes. To Lyra, this was stranger than any cruelty she had known. Why would a man endure mockery just to stand beside her? That night, as they sat by the small fire in the house, Lyra whispered, "Why do you not send me away?" David looked at her for a long time before answering. "Because you are not a burden," he said. "You are a person." The word struck her heart again. Sharp and bright, she turned her face, tears spilling despite her will. Her voice broke as she said, "I do not know how to be a person." David's voice was steady. "Then we will learn together. From that night, something changed. Lyra began to help him more. Cooking, cleaning, asking about tools. Every small act gave her a strange pride, not the pride of chains, but the pride of choice. When David thanked her, the sound felt like sunlight. She had never been thanked before, never been seen, but the shadows were watching. The alien noble who had seen them at the market sat in his tall chamber. He listened as his spies reported. The human treats her like an equal. The people whisper about it. Some even ask questions. The noble's lips curled, his eyes hard. This cannot be allowed, he said coldly. Break them before others start to believe. Back at the house, Lyra felt the air grow heavy with danger. She saw strangers watching from the streets. She heard whispers in the night. David prepared quietly, checking his ship, storing supplies. He said little, but she saw the weight in his eyes. She realized then that this man had chosen her not out of desire, not out of weakness, but out of something greater. He believed in something she did not yet understand, and slowly, painfully, she wanted to believe too. The bond between them was no longer only kindness. It was trust, fragile but growing. It was the start of something that could not be broken by chains. Yet in the shadows, danger gathered, and their peace would not last. The peace did not last. One morning before the sun rose, heavy boots thundered against the ground. Voices shouted, weapons clattered, and the door of the house burst open. Armed guards stormed inside, their armor shining. Their eyes cold, Lyra froze in fear, her body shaking as memories of chains rushed back. David stood calmly, his face hard, though his fists tightened at his side. "You are under arrest," the lead guard declared, his voice like stone. "By order of the council, the human is accused of corruption, rebellion, and theft." David did not resist when they bound his hands. He only looked at Lyra and whispered, "Do not be afraid." But Lyra's heart was breaking. Because she knew she could do nothing, she was still nothing in the eyes of the law. They dragged David through the streets. The crowd gathered quickly, shouting, laughing, pointing. Some threw stones, some spat, some shouted. The human thought he was above us. Now he will learn. Lyra tried to follow, but guards shoved her back. She stumbled to the dirt, tears burning her eyes. The voices of the crowd cut her like knives. "Look at the animal," they said. "Still thinks she is a wife, but soon she will be alone again." The council hall was vast, walls high, torches burning blue fire. On a raised platform sat the alien council, robed and stern. Their faces were filled with disdain as David was brought before them. Chains bound his wrists, but he stood tall, his gaze steady. Lyra was forced into the back, watched by guards. Her voice was silenced, her words not even considered. To them, she was not a witness, not a person, only property. The lead counselor spoke, his voice loud and cruel. "Human, you have shamed yourself by taking a pleasure animal as a wife." The hall echoed with laughter. "You have broken our laws, insulted our ways, and now you must face justice." David's voice did not tremble. "Your laws are chains for the innocent. I do not fear them." A murmur spread across the hall, some shocked by his boldness, others enraged. Lyra's hands shook as she watched. She wanted to scream, to defend him, to tell them he was not cruel, but her mouth stayed closed. Because she knew the truth, her words meant nothing here. Even if she shouted until her voice broke, no one would listen. Tears blurred her vision as she saw David standing alone. Her heart ached with helplessness. The council began to call witnesses. Merchants stepped forward, sneering. "The human mocks our ways. He teaches slaves false pride." Others claimed, "He stirs rebellion. He corrupts the order." Lies filled the hall, twisting every kindness into a crime. David listened quietly, his jaw tight, but he did not bow. Finally, the lead counselor leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Tell us, human," he demanded, "why did you buy her? What was your true reason?" The hall fell silent, every ear waiting. Lyra held her breath, fear burning her chest. If he told them the truth, they would kill him. If he lied, they would still kill him. But David's voice was clear, steady as stone. I bought her because she is not an animal, he said. She is a person, and I would not see her broken. Gasps filled the chamber, shock spreading like fire. The counselors scowled, their faces twisted in anger. Blasphemy, one hissed. Madness, another spat. But a few whispers rose in the crowd, soft, uncertain. What if he is right? Lyra's heart pounded, her tears falling freely. No one had ever spoken for her like this, not once in her life. The man in chains stood taller than kings. The noble who had been watching from the shadows stepped forward now, his smile thin and cruel. This is the truth, he said. The human is dangerous. He spreads poison with his words. If we allow him to live, others will begin to question us. The counselors nodded, their decision already forming. Lyra wanted to move, to run to David, to shield him. But the guards held her back, their grip like iron. Her voice burst out despite the chains of fear. He is not dangerous. He saved me. He gave me life, she cried. The hall roared with laughter. Silence the animal, the counselor ordered. A guard struck her across the face, sending her to the ground. Her cheek burned, her pride shattered, but still she whispered. He is good. The council banged their staffs, voices echoing. The human will be executed, the lead counselor declared. Tomorrow, at dawn, he will hang for his crimes. The hall erupted in cheers and jeers. Lyra's scream was lost in the noise, her body shaking with despair. David looked at her one last time, his eyes calm, his lips forming silent words. Do not give up. Dragged away to the dark cells. He disappeared into the shadows. Lyra was left trembling, her heart breaking, her mind spinning. She had no power, no voice, no way to save him. But deep inside, something stirred, something long buried under fear and pain. She was tired of chains, tired of silence, tired of being nothing. For the first time, she felt the spark of something greater than fear defiance. In the dark hall, the noble leaned toward the council, his voice a whisper. Watch her carefully, he said. Her eyes no longer look like an animal's. The counselors laughed, but the noble's smile was thin and sharp. She is waking, he murmured, and when she wakes fully, she will be dangerous too. The prison was silent, except for dripping water and the sound of chains clinking in the dark. David sat alone in his cell, his hands bound, but his spirit unbroken. Outside the bars, guards whispered about his execution, their laughter sharp, but inside his heart, he held something they could not see, a truth far greater than their lies. In the council hall, Lyra was dragged forward again, her cheek still bruised, her body trembling, but her eyes burning with a strange light. The council had summoned her only to mock her, to show the people that she was nothing. The noble stood nearby, smiling thinly, his eyes watching every move she made. The lead counselor raised his hand. Bring in the human, he ordered. Chains rattled as David was brought to the center of the hall. The crowd jeered. Some threw rotten food, some shouted curses. But he stood tall, his shoulders straight, his gaze never lowering. Lyra's breath caught as she looked at him, pride and fear mixing inside her chest. The counselor's voice rang out. Human, you will die tomorrow, but before you do, tell us this. Why risk everything for an animal? The hall fell silent, waiting for his answer. David's voice was steady. Because she is not an animal, she is alive, and she deserves freedom. Laughter burst across the chamber, cruel and mocking, but David did not flinch. His eyes sharp as steel, the noble stepped forward, his voice dripping with poison. Do not lie to us, human. There must be another reason. His smile widened. Tell us the secret you hide. Tell us why you risk death for one slave. The crowd leaned closer, whispers rising, suspicion filling the air. David looked at them all, his jaw tight, his silence heavy. Finally, he spoke, each word like a hammer. "The secret is this," he said. "Humans do not see slaves. We see people. We see equals." The words struck the hall like thunder. The counselor shouted in rage. The crowd gasped in disbelief. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. Her heart pounding as hope fought with fear, David's voice grew stronger. "We come from a world where chains do not decide worth, where no one is born to serve." He lifted his head high. "Your empire is built on cruelty. But cruelty cannot last forever. One day it will break. And you know it?" The noble's smile faltered for a moment, a shadow crossing his face. He hissed, "Enough of your human pride. You are alone. Your kind is weak. Your words mean nothing." But in the back of the hall, a few voices whispered, "What if he is right? What if slaves are people too?" The whispers spread like sparks in dry grass. Small but dangerous, the counselors banged their staffs in fury, trying to silence the crowd. "This is rebellion," one shouted. "He must die at once." Lyra's chest burned, her hands clenched into fists. For so long she had believed she was nothing. But his words had given her a mirror, and in that mirror she saw not an animal, not property, but someone worth defending. Tears fell down her face as she cried, "He speaks the truth." The guard struck her again, forcing her to the ground, but her voice echoed in the chamber, trembling but fierce. "He gave me choice. He gave me life. No one else ever did." A noble turned sharply, his eyes narrowing on her. "Careful, animal," he said coldly. "Your tongue will be the death of you." But his gaze lingered, because he saw something dangerous in her eyes. Not fear, but fire. The council rose to end the trial, their faces twisted in rage. "Tomorrow, the human dies," the lead counselor declared. "And as for the slave, she will be sent back to the cages, where she belongs." The hall roared with approval. The guards dragged them both away. But as they were pulled apart, David's voice reached her, low and fierce. "Lyra, listen to me. There is more you do not know." That night in the dungeon, the guards dozed, the torches burned low. Lyra slipped close to David's cell, her fingers clutching the bars. Her voice shook. "Tell me the truth. Tell me why you came to that market." David's eyes met hers, steady, tired but unbroken. "I came because I was sent," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Sent by humans who are watching. Humans who will not allow this empire to stand forever." Lyra gasped, her eyes wide. "You are part of something bigger," she whispered. David nodded. "Yes, but it is not armies or weapons that will change them. It is proof. Proof that even one life can be more than a chain." He reached through the bars, his hand brushing hers. "You are that proof, Lyra. You are the reason I chose to act." Her heart raced, her breath unsteady. "You risked everything." "For me?" David's voice was firm. "Not just for you, for everyone like you. But you were the one in front of me, and I would not look away." Tears spilled from her eyes as she gripped his hand. For the first time, she felt not just rescued, but chosen. The sound of boots echoed in the hall. The guards returning, David pulled back, his face calm, his voice low. "Tomorrow, they will try to break us. But remember, the secret is not me. The secret is you." The guards shoved her back, locking her in another cell. She sat on the cold floor, her heart pounding with new fire. In the shadows above, a noble watched from the balcony, his smile thin and cruel. "So this is the human secret," he whispered. "Hope, dangerous hope." His eyes narrowed. "We will crush it before it spreads." But deep inside her chest, Lyra knew the truth. Chains could silence her voice, but they could not silence the fire that had been lit. And tomorrow, when the sun rose, the empire would see it burn. The night before the execution was heavy with silence. In the dark cell, Lyra sat with her knees pulled close, her eyes wide open, her heart pounding. She could hear David's steady breathing from the next cell. Calm even in chains, his calmness gave her strength. Yet fear clawed inside her chest. Tomorrow he would die. and she would be dragged back to the cages tomorrow. The little spark of hope he gave her would be crushed. But as she sat there, something strange stirred within her. It began as a warmth, deep in her chest, spreading through her arms and legs. Her body shook, her breath quickened, her skin glowed faintly silver. She gasped, clutching her stomach, whispering, "What is happening to me?" David's voice came low, steady. "Do not fear it, Lyra. It is part of you." Her eyes darted toward him, filled with shock. "You knew?" "Yes," he said softly. "I saw it the first moment I looked into your eyes. A strength waiting to rise, before she could speak again." Guards stormed in, pulling David from his cell. The sound of chains scraping stone echoed like thunder. Lyra screamed, "No, please, do not take him." But they shoved her back against the bars. David's eyes found hers one last time, calm and fierce. "Remember what I told you?" he said. "The secret is not me. The secret is you." The dawn was cold, the sky pale with thin light, a council square filled with a roaring crowd. Eager to see the human broken, the councilors sat on their high seats. Proud and cruel, the noble stood close, his smile sharp, his eyes glittering. David was dragged to the platform, chains heavy around his wrists and neck. Lyra was forced to the ground at the edge of the stage, guards pressing her down. The lead counselor raised his hand for silence. "This human dared to insult our laws, dared to call an animal equal to us," he shouted. "Today he will pay for his madness." The crowd cheered, voices rising like a storm, but above the noise, David's voice rang out clear. "You may kill me, but you cannot kill truth," he said. "Your empire will fall, not by my hand, but by those you call slaves." The words struck Lyra's heart like lightning. Her body shook again, heat rushing through her veins. The air around her seemed to ripple, the ground trembling beneath her. The guards stepped back in shock as silver light burst from her skin. Chains snapped apart as if they were paper. Her eyes glowed bright. Her hair lifted as if touched by fire. The crowd gasped, fear spreading like wildfire. "She is no animal," someone whispered. "She is something more." The counselor shouted for guards, but many hesitated, their eyes wide with terror. The noble's smile faltered, his voice sharp. "Stop her, now." But it was too late. Lyra rose to her feet, power pouring from her like a storm. She raised her hand, and the weapons of the guards twisted and broke. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. "You called me nothing. You called me animal, but I am alive. I am free." The words thundered through the square, silencing the crowd. For the first time, she believed them herself. The guards tried to drag David to the gallows, but she moved faster. With a sweep of her arm, the chains shattered, falling to the ground in pieces. David stumbled forward, his wrists bleeding but free. He looked at her with pride, not fear. "You see now," he whispered. "You were never weak. You were only told to believe it." The counselors screamed for her death, their voices shrill with rage. The noble stepped forward, his cloak swirling, his eyes burning. "You are nothing but a mistake," he shouted. "A weapon you cannot control." Lyra's voice cut through his words, strong and fierce. "No, I am not your mistake. I am my own choice." The crowd shifted, fear mixing with awe. Some whispered, "If she is not an animal, then what are we?" Others fell silent, their chains of thought breaking as quickly as iron chains had. The noble saw the danger, his teeth clenched, his voice cold. "This ends here," he said, raising his hand for his soldiers. But David stepped beside Lyra, his body weak, but his spirit unbroken. "Together," he said, and she nodded. The soldiers charged, but Lyra's power surged like a wave. Walls of force knocked them back. Weapons shattered, dust rose in clouds. She held her ground, her eyes blazing, her hands glowing with silver light. David shouted to the crowd, his voice fierce, "Do you see now? Chains mean nothing. Freedom belongs to all of you. Some cheered, some wept, others fled, but none could deny what they had seen. At last, the square fell silent, except for the crackle of broken fire. The counselors retreated in fear. Their power crumbling, the noble glared at Lyra, hatred burning in his eyes. "This is not the end," he spat. "You and your human will bring war." And he vanished into the shadows. Leaving his threat behind, Lyra stood trembling, the glow fading from her skin, her body weak, her knees shaking, but her spirit burning bright. David caught her before she fell, holding her steady. "You did it," he whispered. "You showed them what they feared most." She looked up at him, her voice soft but fierce. "I am not a slave," she said. "Not anymore." And in that moment, though danger still surrounded them, though the noble plotted revenge, though the empire would strike again, Lyra knew her chains were broken forever. The awakening had come, and there was no turning back. The city did not forget what happened in the square. Whispers spread faster than fire, whispers of a girl with silver light in her hands, whispers of a human who defied the council and lived. For the first time in years, slaves lifted their heads, their eyes daring to hope, and for the first time, the council felt fear in their own hall. Lyra and David escaped into the hills beyond the outpost. They carried little, only food, water, and a ship too damaged to fly. But they carried something greater than weapons. They carried belief. Each night they sat by the fire, watching the stars, David's voice calm. "They will come for us, but when they do, we will not stand alone." And he was right. Others began to find them, one by one. An old slave with scars across his back, a young mother with a child, a soldier who had thrown down his weapon in the square. They came in secret, their footsteps silent, but their eyes burning with the same fire. Lyra looked at them and felt her chest tighten. Once she had been nothing, but now they looked to her as something more. She stood before them, her hands shaking, but her voice steady. "I am no leader," she said. "I was broken like you. I was chained like you. But if I can rise, so can you?" The group bowed their heads, some with tears, some with hope. David placed his hand on her shoulder, whispering, "You are stronger than you know." In the council city, rage boiled. The noble sat in the high chamber, his voice cold. "They whisper her name. They whisper freedom," he said. The councilors trembled, their control slipping like sand. The noble slammed his hand against the table. "Then we will show them fear. We will burn the human and his slave bride, and all who follow them." Armies marched, ships filled the sky, banners of the empire, dark against the stars. The ground shook as machines of war rolled forward. The people in the hills saw the fires in the distance, fear filling their eyes. Lyra's hands trembled, her heart pounding. She whispered to David, "We cannot fight them. They are too many." David looked at her calmly, his voice firm. "We do not fight them with numbers. We fight them with truth." When the soldiers arrived, they found no army waiting. They found a circle of people standing in the open. Men, women, children, slaves no longer. Lyra stood at the front, her silver eyes blazing, David at her side. The noble stepped forward from the army, his cloak sweeping the dirt. He sneered, "So this is your rebellion? A handful of broken animals and one foolish human." But Lyra's voice carried across the field, clear as thunder. "We are not animals, we are not broken, we are alive, and we are free." The crowd behind her shouted the words with her, their voices shaking the sky. The soldiers hesitated, doubt flickering in their eyes. The noble snarled, "Kill them all." The army raised their weapons, but before they could strike, Lyra lifted her hands. Silver light burst forth, not wild, not chaotic, but controlled. The ground shook. A wall of force rose between her people and the soldiers. The weapons cracked, the air roared. The soldiers stumbled back in fear, their eyes wide. Some dropped their guns, some fled, others fell to their knees. Because in that moment, they saw not an animal, not a slave, but a leader. David stepped forward, his voice ringing. You call yourselves masters, but you fear the very truth you try to chain. No empire can survive when its people stop kneeling. His words struck deep, echoing across the battlefield. The noble's face twisted with fury, his voice shrill. You will destroy everything. You will bring chaos. Lyra met his gaze, her voice strong. No, you brought chaos when you built chains. We bring choice. The soldiers began to lower their weapons, their loyalty cracking. Some walked away, some joined the crowd behind Lyra. The noble screamed, his voice breaking with rage. Cowards, all of you, I will end this myself. He raised his weapon, aiming at David, but before he could fire, Lyra's light wrapped around him. The weapon melted, his cloak burned, his body lifted into the air. Her voice thundered. You called me less than nothing. Now hear me, I am free, and I will never bow. The noble fell to the ground, broken and defeated, his army scattered, their banners falling. The council's power cracked that day, their empire shaken, and in the ashes of fear, something new began to grow. Lyra stood among her people, weak but unbroken. David held her hand, his voice soft. You see now, it was always you. She looked at the crowd, their eyes filled with hope. Once she had been sold in chains, treated as less than life. Now she was a wife, a leader, a symbol, not because David gave her worth, but because he showed her she already had it. The sky burned with the light of a new dawn. Whispers spread across the stars, whispers of humans who saw slaves as equals, whispers of a girl who rose from chains to lead. The empire would strike again. Wars would come, dangers would grow, but the first step had been taken, and nothing could undo it. Because in the heart of every slave, a fire had been lit, a fire called choice. And in the heart of one silver-eyed woman and one human man, that fire would never die.